All right, to discuss, I'm joined by the CEO of Inkunzi Wealth, that's Owen Nkomo. Owen, great to have you with us. What are you expecting this Thursday?
Thank you, Francis. Good to be back here again. I really expect more guidance from the presidency in terms of what I think is the most important thing in the country, Francis. Government's plan to get the economy going again, and government's plan to make sure we reduce unemployment, which is extremely high. The unemployment numbers above 34%, one of the highest in the world. And unemployment needs to be taken care of in order for us to not have social unrest. And we're expecting the presidency to give us guidance as well on progress being made at the parastatal, which is giving us headaches every day, which is Eskom. We're getting rolling blackouts or whatever is defined as on the day, depending on whatever Eskom's requirements are. But it's a big problem for us, to not have adequate supply of electricity. And importantly as well, I just want to get a sense of whether the president sees the economy in the same eye as we do, because in order to start creating the jobs that need to be created, Francis. And hopefully the president maybe is going to also touch on, how they plan to finance this growth that we're talking about, which will bring about unemployment and start to move the economy in a different direction.
All right, Owen, we could hear you clearly. We lost you for a little bit there, but I think you did outline your main points. And let's focus on Eskom, because there was a lot of fanfare about the restructuring of Eskom into these 3 sections announced in the past. Has it been too quiet for you, or are there signs that something is moving? We always talk about implementation, the follow-through on the plans that have been announced in the past.
Absolutely. That's exactly what we're hoping to get a picture of, Francis, is the separation of Eskom into those 3 operational entities moving in the right direction. And if so, are we going to get the results that we're looking for out of this plan? Many still believe that this plan is not necessarily what is required, but instead streamlining of Eskom's operations, and instead making sure that, key personnel that are required in the company to bring about the turnaround strategy required out of Eskom are actually given an opportunity to do that, and potentially maybe to reduce headcount where we don't need it. So we do definitely need good guidance on that when it comes to Eskom, because without Eskom, Francis, how are you going to attract foreign investors to come and bring their hard-earned cash to invest in South Africa? And we need the president to tell us what has happened to his investment roadshows. It's gone very, very quiet on that front. And I was hoping maybe he can give an indication of where people's, views are about South Africa. Yes, we've had COVID. The past 1.5 odd years has been difficult, but we had been banking on the president to convert those pledges that came from overseas, because we desperately need investments to come into the country.
And then, of course, you mentioned jobs, and the president has to talk about joblessness in this country, which is just incredible. And we've had these plans again announced in the past, the COVID-19 recovery plan involving infrastructure. We're hearing from the CDE that the infrastructure plans have basically stalled. So that was meant to not only provide roads and bridges, but also provide jobs. So what can he say now, given a sense of helplessness or mistrust about the implementation of previous plans?
He remains the sole custodian of the success, the delivery of all his plans, of the NDP, the turnaround strategy in the country, this jobs environment after COVID. It's his responsibility, it is his job. So I don't expect the president to come out and tell us that there's challenges there. I expect him to come out and say, these are the challenges and these are the solutions I am bringing forward, and this is how I'm going to measure success, in terms of all these implementations I need to do to get people back in employment, to get companies back to being able to afford, affordable loans, get funding, etc. I'm in Newcastle as I speak to you, Francis. I can tell you this infrastructure space is a big space. It's a space that the government needs to really put the right policies in place, and more importantly, put the right implementations in place. But right now, we're working with guys that are doing work for the government and for the private sector. And small businesses particularly are struggling to get paid on time. And if you're going to kill more small businesses, Mr. Ramaphosa, you're just making your job harder. I do believe that you need to make sure that small businesses that do work in the infrastructure space do actually get to start doing the work, and they do get paid for these. That way, we're going to save millions of jobs, in my humble view, Francis.
And again, that is something that government has been talking about for years. While the joblessness remains, unemployment soars, we know now that about half of the South African population is relying on some sort of social grant. And a lot of talk about the 350 COVID-19 grant. Would the markets actually like some clarity now on whether that will become a basic income grant that's not temporary but permanent?
No, look, I mean, I think the basic income grant, there's been many debates around it. I think the fact is we can't afford a lot of things as South Africa. And importantly, I think we can't afford to continue to put money where we're not creating jobs. I believe that the people receiving this 350 rands would much rather have an opportunity to get permanently employed than to get a grant. So therefore, in my view, I do think the government needs to probably have a rethink. It's what the impact of the social spending, people getting child grants, 6 kids you get paid for 6 of those kids fully. Can we afford to live like a very developed economy, given the challenges we have and given the lack of growth in the economy and given the lack of a growth in the tax base?
But Owen,
we can't.
Can we afford not to pay those grants and not to actually increase the grants when many people, young people, have actually no hope of getting a job?
Absolutely, we need to pay for some of the people, but we cannot pay for all of the people, Francis. I think the president needs to say the most vulnerable people that can absolutely do nothing. Definitely, they must get that help. But someone who has had 2 kids, 3 kids, 4 kids, should really support that person by giving them more child grants. And then some people point out that politically, you're playing with the vote mechanism there. If you reduce, the idea is not to take away, it's to reduce, to make sure that we don't just go out there and spend the very limited tax collection that we do on people that will not generate additional tax to the economy. I believe the president needs to be brave enough to force industry and government employees and officials to drive the creation of opportunities for the private sector to bring on more jobs. That is a better solution than building a country dependent socially on the government's paycheck and a limited tax base.
All right, thank you very much. The CEO of Inkunzi Wealth, Owen Nkomo.